In the last video, we followed Jacob's journey as he reconciled with his brother Esau and settled in Shechem. We saw how God guided Jacob and protected him as he built his family and prepared to establish his descendants in the promised land. As we continue, we will delve into the next chapters, revealing dramatic events that shaped Jacob's family and the future of Israel. Dinah, Jacob's daughter by Leah, went out to visit the women of Shechem. While she was there, Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her. Overcome with lust, Shechem took Dinah and violated her. However, afterward, he felt affection for her and spoke kindly to her, desiring to marry her. Shechem told his father Hamor, "Get me this girl to be my wife." When Jacob heard what had happened to Dinah, he remained silent until his sons returned from the fields. When they heard the news, Jacob's sons were furious, for Shechem had committed a disgraceful act in Israel by defiling their sister. Hamor came to Jacob and pleaded on behalf of his son. He said, "My son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Let us intermarry. You give us your daughters, and we will give you ours. You may settle among us, the land is open to you." Shechem himself spoke to Dinah's brothers, saying, "Let me find favor in your eyes. I will pay whatever dowry you demand for her." But Jacob's sons responded deceitfully. They said, "We cannot give our sister to a man who is uncircumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. However, if you and all your men become circumcised, we will give you our daughters and take your daughters as wives. Then we will live among you and become one people. But if you refuse, we will take our sister and leave." Hamor and Shechem agreed to their terms, and Shechem wasted no time, for he was deeply in love with Dinah. Hamor and Shechem persuaded all the men of their city to be circumcised, saying, "These people are friendly toward us. Let them live in our land and trade here. We will marry their daughters, and they will marry ours." 3 days later, while the men were still in pain from the circumcision, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city. They killed every male, including Hamor and Shechem. They rescued Dinah from Shechem's house and plundered the city, taking livestock, women, and children. When Jacob heard of this, he was deeply troubled. He said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites. If they unite against us, my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" God spoke to Jacob and said, "Arise, go up to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Hearing this, Jacob turned to his household and all those with him. "Rid yourselves of the foreign gods among you. Purify yourselves and change your garments. Let us go to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in my time of distress and has been with me wherever I have gone." The family obeyed Jacob, handing over all their foreign gods and earrings. Jacob buried the idols and earrings under an oak tree near Shechem. As they set out on their journey, the surrounding cities were filled with the fear of God, and no one dared to pursue Jacob's family. Jacob and all those with him arrived safely at Luz, also called Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There, Jacob built an altar and named the place El Bethel, meaning God of Bethel, because God had revealed himself to Jacob there when he fled from Esau. During their time at Bethel, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, passed away. She was buried beneath an oak tree near Bethel, which was called Allon Bakuth, meaning Oak of Weeping. God appeared to Jacob once again at Bethel and blessed him, saying, "Your name is Jacob, but it shall no longer be Jacob. Your name will be Israel." God continued, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I now give to you and your offspring." Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had spoken to him. He poured a drink offering and oil on it, consecrating the place, which he called Bethel. As they journeyed from Bethel toward Ephrath, Rachel went into labor. The birth was difficult, and the midwife reassured her, saying, "Don't be afraid, you have another son." As Rachel's life slipped away during childbirth, she named the child Ben-Oni, meaning, "son of my sorrow." However, Jacob called him Benjamin, meaning, "son of my right hand." Rachel passed away and was buried on the way to Ephrath, also known as Bethlehem. Jacob set up a pillar on her grave, a marker that stood as a memorial to her. Jacob, now called Israel, continued his journey and settled near the Tower of Eder. While there, an incident occurred. Reuben, Jacob's eldest son, dishonored his father by sleeping with Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant and Jacob's concubine. Jacob heard about this but did not address it immediately. Jacob's 12 sons continued to grow into the family that would become the tribes of Israel. Leah's sons, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Rachel's sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Bilhah's sons, Dan and Naphtali. Zilpah's sons, Gad and Asher. Later, Jacob traveled to Mamre, near Hebron, where his father Isaac still lived. Isaac lived to be 180 years old. When he passed away, old and full of years, he was gathered to his people. Esau and Jacob came together once more to bury their father, honoring his long and faithful life. Esau had 3 wives. Together, they had 5 sons. Esau and his family moved to the hill country of Seir, as the land of Canaan could not sustain the wealth and livestock of both Esau and Jacob. Esau became the father of the Edomites, a significant nation. The descendants of Esau include various chiefs, referred to as dukes, and kings who ruled in Edom before Israel had any kings. Among the notable descendants are Eliphaz's son Amalek, who became the ancestor of the Amalekites. The chiefs of Esau's family, including Taman, Omar, Kenaz, and Korah. Jacob and his family were living in the land of Canaan. Jacob's son Joseph, at just 17 years old, worked alongside his brothers, tending the flock. Joseph often observed his brothers' behavior and brought back reports to their father. Jacob, also called Israel, loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was born to him in his old age. To show his affection, Jacob made Joseph a special coat of many colors. This favoritism caused resentment among Joseph's brothers. They couldn't speak kindly to him and began to hate him even more after Joseph shared his dreams. In one dream, Joseph saw himself and his brothers binding sheaves of grain in a field. His sheaf stood upright while his brothers' sheaves bowed down to it. When he told them about it, they said angrily, "Do you think you'll reign over us?" Their hatred grew stronger. Joseph had another dream where the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. When he shared this dream with his father and brothers, even Jacob was puzzled and rebuked him, saying, "Will your mother, your brothers, and I really bow down to you?" Though his brothers were envious, Jacob kept the matter in mind. One day, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks near Shechem. Jacob asked Joseph to check on them and bring back news. Joseph agreed and set out. He reached Shechem but couldn't find them. A man noticed Joseph wandering in the field and asked him what he was looking for. Joseph explained he was searching for his brothers, and the man told him they had gone to Dothan. When Joseph approached them in Dothan, his brothers saw him coming from a distance. Fueled by jealousy and anger, they plotted against him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said. "Let's kill him and throw him into a pit." We can say a wild animal devoured him, and then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. Reuben, the eldest brother, stepped in to prevent Joseph's death. "Don't shed blood," he said. "Throw him into this pit instead." Reuben secretly planned to rescue Joseph later and return him to their father. When Joseph arrived, the brothers stripped him of his colorful coat and threw him into an empty pit. As they sat down to eat, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelite traders traveling to Egypt with goods like spices, balm, and myrrh. Judah suggested, "What profit is there in killing our brother? Let's sell him to these traders instead. After all, he is our flesh and blood." The brothers agreed, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. The traders took Joseph to Egypt. Later, when Reuben returned to the pit and found Joseph gone, he was devastated. Tearing his clothes in anguish, he asked his brothers, "What will I do now?" Together, they concocted a plan. They killed a goat, dipped Joseph's coat in its blood, and sent it to their father. When Jacob saw the coat, he recognized it immediately. "It is my son's coat," he said, heartbroken. "A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Jacob mourned deeply, tearing his own clothes and wearing sackcloth as a sign of grief. Though his family tried to comfort him, Jacob refused to be consoled. "I will mourn for my son until I join him in the grave," he said, weeping for Joseph. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt, where the Midianite traders sold him to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. During this time, Judah, one of Jacob's sons, moved away from his brothers and settled near an Adullamite man named Hira. While there, Judah met and married the daughter of a Canaanite named Shua. Together, they had 3 sons, Er, Onan, and Shelah. Shelah was born in a place called Chezib. Judah arranged a marriage for his eldest son, Er, with a woman named Tamar. However, Er was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and because of this, God took his life. Following the custom of the time, Judah instructed his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar and produce offspring on behalf of his late brother. But Onan refused to fulfill this duty. Though he married Tamar, he intentionally prevented her from having a child. This displeased the Lord, and Onan also lost his life. After the deaths of his 2 sons, Judah hesitated to allow his youngest son, Shelah, to marry Tamar. Fearing that Shelah might also die like his brothers, Judah told Tamar to return to her father's house and remain a widow until Shelah grew up. Tamar did as instructed and went back to live with her family. Some time later, Judah's wife passed away. After his period of mourning, Judah went to Timnath to shear his sheep, accompanied by his friend Hira. When Tamar heard that her father-in-law was traveling to Timnath, she realized that Shelah had grown up, but she had not been given to him as a wife as promised. Determined to secure her rights, Tamar removed her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and sat by the roadside on the way to Timnath. Judah saw her but didn't recognize her as his daughter-in-law, as her face was covered. Mistaking her for a prostitute, he approached her and asked to be with her. Tamar agreed but asked for a pledge to secure his payment. Judah promised to send her a young goat from his flock, but Tamar requested his signet, bracelets, and staff as a guarantee until the goat was delivered. Judah gave her these items, and Tamar became pregnant by him. Afterward, Tamar left, removed her veil, and put on her widow's garments again. Judah sent the goat through his friend Hira to retrieve his pledge, but Hira couldn't find her. The men of the area told Hira that no prostitute had been there. Judah, not wanting to draw attention to the matter, decided to leave it, saying, "Let her keep the items so we are not disgraced." About 3 months later, Judah was informed that Tamar had acted immorally and was pregnant. Outraged, Judah ordered that she be brought out and burned. As she was brought out, Tamar sent a message to Judah, saying, I am pregnant by the man who owns these items. Please identify them, this signet, these bracelets, and this staff. Judah recognized the items as his own and admitted, She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. After that, Judah did not have relations with Tamar again. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, she delivered twins. During the birth, one baby put out his hand first, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around it, saying, This one came out first. However, the baby pulled his hand back, and his brother was born first instead. The midwife exclaimed, How have you broken through? So, the firstborn was named Pharez, meaning breach. The second baby, with the scarlet thread on his hand, was named Sarah. Joseph was taken down to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. However, the Lord was with Joseph, and everything he did prospered. Joseph quickly proved himself to be hardworking and trustworthy, and Potiphar noticed that the Lord was blessing everything Joseph touched. Joseph found favor with Potiphar, who made him overseer of his entire household, entrusting him with all that he owned. From that time, the Lord blessed Potiphar's house because of Joseph. The blessing extended to everything Potiphar had, both in his home and in the fields. Potiphar trusted Joseph completely and left everything in his care, only concerning himself with the food he ate. Joseph was well-built and handsome, which did not go unnoticed by others. After some time, Potiphar's wife began to notice Joseph and attempted to seduce him. She said to him, Come, lie with me. But Joseph refused. He said, My master trusts me with everything in this house and has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Day after day, she tried to entice Joseph, but he refused to give in or even be near her. One day, when Joseph went into the house to attend to his duties, none of the other servants were inside. Potiphar's wife grabbed him by his garment and again said, Lie with me. Joseph left his garment in her hand and fled from the house. Seeing that Joseph had left his garment and fled, she called the servants and accused him, saying, Look, this Hebrew slave has been brought here to mock us. He tried to assault me, but I screamed, and he ran away, leaving his garment behind. She kept the garment until Potiphar returned home, and then she repeated her accusation, saying, That Hebrew servant you brought into our house came to mock me. When I screamed, he left his garment and ran out. When Potiphar heard his wife's accusations, he was furious. He had Joseph taken and thrown into prison, where the king's prisoners were kept. But even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph. He showed mercy and granted him favor with the prison warden. The warden put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners and entrusted him with the daily operations. Whatever Joseph did, the Lord made it prosper, and the warden did not have to worry about anything under Joseph's care. Some time later, the chief butler and the chief baker of the king of Egypt offended their master Pharaoh. Furious with them, Pharaoh had both men thrown into the same prison where Joseph was being held. The captain of the guard assigned Joseph to attend to them, and they remained in custody for some time. One night, both the butler and the baker had dreams, each with its own meaning. The next morning, Joseph noticed their troubled expressions and asked, Why do you look so sad today? We've had dreams, they replied, but there's no one to interpret them. Joseph said, Interpretations belong to God. Tell me your dreams. The chief butler spoke first. In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me. On the vine were 3 branches. As it budded, blossoms appeared, and the clusters of grapes ripened. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, pressed them into the cup, and gave it to Pharaoh. Joseph said, "This is the interpretation. The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position. You will again place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to when you were his butler. But please, when you're restored, remember me and mention me to Pharaoh. Help me get out of this prison, for I was taken from the land of the Hebrews, and I've done nothing to deserve being in this dungeon." Seeing that the interpretation was favorable, the chief baker shared his dream. "In my dream, I had 3 baskets of bread on my head. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds were eating them out of the basket." Joseph replied, "This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will execute you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, he held a feast for all his servants. He summoned the butler and the baker from prison. Pharaoh restored the chief butler to his former position, and he once again served Pharaoh's cup. But the chief baker was executed, just as Joseph had interpreted. Despite Joseph's request, the chief butler did not remember him. He forgot all about Joseph. The story of Genesis 34 to 40 is a journey through human struggles, divine interventions, and the unfolding of God's promises. We see the tragic events in Shechem, the complex relationships in Jacob's family, and the rise and trials of Joseph. Each chapter reveals the consequences of choices, the resilience of faith, and the sovereignty of God in all circumstances. Despite betrayal, suffering, and separation, God's plan steadily unfolds, reminding us that His purpose will always prevail. Whether in the darkest moments or in the heights of favor, God's hand remains upon His people, guiding them toward His ultimate promise. This story reminds us of God's unchanging faithfulness and His ability to bring purpose out of even the most challenging circumstances. Through Jacob's family's struggles and Joseph's trials, we learn that God is always present, guiding His people toward His promises. No matter the betrayal, pain, or obstacles we face, we can trust that God's plans are good and His timing is perfect. Joseph's unwavering faith amidst injustice encourages us to stay steadfast, knowing that trials are not the end but often the path to greater blessings. This story also teaches us the power of forgiveness and the importance of trusting in God's sovereignty, as His grace and mercy work even through human failures. Let us affirm today that God is with us, His purpose for our lives is unshakable, and His faithfulness will never fail. If this story has inspired you to reflect on God's faithfulness and purpose in your life, remember that His plans are perfect, even in the face of trials. Let's walk with faith and trust, just as Joseph did, knowing that God is always with us. If you enjoyed this journey through Genesis, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating Bible stories, packed with lessons for everyday life. Hit the like button, share this video with your friends and family, and let's continue to explore the wonders of God's Word together. See you in the next story.